Another quick slide. This is about other projects. This is a Spanish content project, and we're developing blog articles, videos, and other content to reach people who speak Spanish. You will have to know that Spanish is the second most spoken language all over the world. More than 500 million people do speak Spanish, 41 million people in the US, and almost 30% of US people, population speaks only Spanish. And in Mexico, we have over 90 million Spanish speaking adults. So most of these people do not have access to this content, to this information, and most people are dying from heart attacks and stroke. So that's what we're looking for. I want to give just a quick shout out to Leonor Batani, who is a Mexican fellow who lives in the States, who is helping us to develop some of this information. So thank you, Leonor, for reaching out to us and helping us to accomplish this other project, because as you see, the channel has grown a lot, and there's a lot of info on English that we have been covering, and we want to translate all that information into Spanish and reach more people that need this access to this information. Right now, to the main topic, I will leave the lead and give that to David. So, Gilbert, if you please give us the water ball so we can get started with our main topic of the week. Great. Thanks a lot. I was worried that I will screw over the water ball thing and just ask for another transition video or something. So, David, let's talk about keeping your brain healthy.
Okay, so welcome everybody, and I think when we ask people, and the topic is longevity and how long they're going to live and how well they're going to live, more people are afraid that they're going to lose their mental facilities than they lose their physical facilities. I think if given the choice, they'd rather keep their mind because to survive without knowing really who you are, what's going on, is not really any quality of life. So this little 3-pound organ between our ears, this brain of ours, really is who we are. It's our memories, it's our thoughts, and you've heard the rumor or the myth that we only use 10% of our brain, and that's just not true. Our brain is active all the time, whether you're sleeping or whether you're awake. So our purpose today is to see if we can keep it that way. So I'm going to be referring to some notes. So if you'll excuse me, I won't always be looking directly into the camera because I want to make sure we cover all the topics today. But just a definition, first of all, dementia, not being able to use your mental facilities, is different from Alzheimer's. You can have dementia with Alzheimer's. You can have dementia without Alzheimer's. And surprisingly, as you'll see today, you can have Alzheimer's without dementia. They did an autopsy on a gentleman, and the brain seems to, in some people, have this capacity, especially if you have a lifestyle that is conducive to this, to actually work around some of the plaque that forms because of Alzheimer's and still allow you to be functional. This man lived into his 90s, was mentally functioning just fine, no dementia. Upon autopsy, he was found to have advanced Alzheimer's. So this can go either way. We want to avoid all of it if we can, but of course the point is that Alzheimer's and dementia are not necessarily the same thing, but they can share symptoms. So let me give you an idea of some of the things we're going to talk about today that'll keep your brain healthy. One of them, of course, the biggest one, is to not smoke and use tobacco products. Most of you probably aren't doing that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on this program today with us if you were a smoker. If you happen to use tobacco, though, I want you to realize that in everything we say today, that's your number one priority. It doesn't matter. All these other things don't matter if you continue to use tobacco. So, Jesus, you've got a slide there. Tell them about what you've got there.
Well, I just will add before talking about tobacco that you're completely right. Alzheimer's has a different physiopathology, meaning how the disease is being developed. than other types of dementia. So your vascular system on the brain also plays a role, because we have vascular dementia, which are due to decreased blood flow to the brain, and how all these nutrients that go into it are being affected. You will have to know the brain needs two key components to work correctly. It needs glucose and it needs oxygen. So if you have impairment of any of those, all of these issues can combine, and we will talk about a little bit later about how the glucose gets metabolized in the brain in that regard. And for Alzheimer's, you have another substance called amyloid, and this amyloid also plays a key role on how the brain can function or not. So the brain has a different structure in each part of it. So you have the frontal cortex that is in charge of how do you of your behavior outside. How do you control your impulses? You have the prefrontal cortex that is in charge of the movement of the body, and you have parts of the brain that are in charge of language or interpreting or how to see and every all of that stuff. So depending on which part of the brain is affected, that's where you can see some of this stuff. And usually dementia can alter parts of the hippocampus that is in charge of memory. So you can see that side of it, but that's not the rule of thumb for everyone. There are different stages and different clinical aspects to consider. And just wanted to point out the genetic role of this. If you have family who had dementia, it plays a role, but it also depends how do you take your life to that. What's your lifestyle compared to your fellow family members who develop these diseases? Because if you have issues with insulin resistance, if you have issues with blood pressure, if you have other stuff going on, the risk of you developing also some kind of dementia increases with that.
I've heard it said before that genetics is a gun and lifestyle pulls the trigger. So you can own a gun and never be harmed by it unless the trigger is pulled. And so even if you have Alzheimer's, dementia in your family, if you have obesity in your family, if you have diabetes in your family, you are not obligated to manifest those same things in your generation again. It just means you must be more vigilant than the average person. You must be more careful. And I think for most people, to avoid those diseases, they'd be willing to do that.
Yes, absolutely. So anything else to add about the smoking?
No, I would just say that I have friends who have smoked for over 40 years. It was part of who they were. I would never have guessed that they could finally successfully get off of tobacco, and yet they have. I've seen it multiple times. And I want to just tell you that they are no more morally superior than those of you watching right now who might still be using tobacco products. You can do it. It is not easy. It is painful. It is an addictive substance, a drug, and it will hurt. But the benefits, once you get through that, are so tremendously positive that it's worth going through. We don't have to tell any of you. You already know this story. But all I'm telling you once again is just to reemphasize the fact that if you want your brain to stay healthy, you can't have tobacco products in your life.
Yeah, and you know that the cardiovascular system plays an interesting role over there, right?
So absolutely right. And so that leads us to point number one that I wanted to talk about, and that is the heart of the matter. And if you want to have maintain a healthy brain, you've got to maintain a healthy vascular system, which means also a healthy heart. So as you work on your heart health, you get a benefit of brain health as well, because it's the vascular system, and vessels are vessels wherever you are in the body. I think it's amazing to realize there's 60,000 miles of blood vessels in the human body. I can't comprehend that. 60,000 miles, but most of those, about 80% of them, are those smallest of all, the capillaries, and that's what is throughout your brain. And we got to maintain that good health for those to function correctly. So you work on your blood pressure, which is our second point. You got to control blood pressure. And a lot of people have borderline blood pressure, and we don't tolerate that anymore. I have a little blood pressure. No, no, you have high blood pressure. You don't have a little blood pressure. So here's your goal. If you're not familiar with this, it's below 120 for the top number and below 80 for the bottom number. 120 over 80 is considered high blood pressure. We want it below 120 and below 80. Listen to this. People who have high blood pressure in their 50s are at much higher risk of dementia as they get older. A study that was published in the journal Neurology found that women who had high blood pressure in their 40s had a 73% increase of developing dementia compared to women in their 40s who had normal blood pressure. So this is not just about, taking medicine or not taking medicine. You got to get your blood pressure under control if you want your brain to still be functioning later in life.
Yeah, and I will just make a quick comment about that. You have different conditions on the heart that can end up affecting the brain. One of the most common says atrial fibrillation, and as you know, the atrial fibrillation is an arrhythmia or a different rhythm of the heart where you can develop clots inside the heart. That clot can go from the upper chambers from the heart to the lower chambers of the heart, and they travel through the arteries and end up in the brain. That's when a stroke comes in, and that's one of the major causes of stroke. And when you have problems with your coagulation cascade or coagulation system, plus high blood pressure, plus affected arterioles or the wall of the intima layers of the brain or the arteries on the brain, you can develop all of that stuff. And going to the blood pressure, you can see a few years back, the American Heart Association changed the cut points for high blood pressure. Before, we thought that 140 over 90 was the cutoff for blood pressure, and that's where people started getting medication from their physician. But the thing is, this is similar to the touch of sugar in diabetes. If you had blood pressure from 120 to 80 or over that in a consistent way, and you might not need medications yet, but you need to make some changes in your lifestyle, do exercise, eat better, because that blood pressure is affecting the wall of your arteries already, and you don't feel it, you don't see it. We call hypertension the silent killer because it's there, it's affecting your body, and you don't even feel a thing until the stroke or the heart attack comes by.
And I would mention from a food standpoint, one of the first things that many physicians will do if you have high blood pressure is tell you to get rid of the salt shaker. I'm going to say, in all due respect, that's exactly opposite of what you should be doing. You should realize that 70% of the salt that most people takes in comes from the supermarket, from the grocery store, in processed foods. That's where 70% of the sodium comes from, the salt. And so to tell someone to get rid of their salt shaker is like putting a teaspoon of water on a fire. It helps a little bit, but not much. What you really need to do if you want to get your blood pressure under control as it relates to salt is that you need to realize where the salt is coming from. And when you realize that, you can actually buy lower salt foods, and this might sound heretical, but I think you should put the salt shaker back on the table again when combined with low salt foods. Those low salt foods taste pretty bad, but if you put the salt shaker on just before you eat them, the salt will make the food taste better. A lot of people are surprised at McDonald's. I ask them, what's the high salt food at McDonald's? And they all say French fries. And that's not true. It's because the salt is on the outside of French fries that you think it's high in salt. You can use that to your benefit by actually using the salt shaker when you buy lower salt foods in the grocery store. Then you will really be making a difference when it comes to salt and your blood pressure.
And that leads me just a quick, really interesting point. And public health changes all over the world. And this, I completely agree with you. And this is like the sugar on your coffee. You're really worried about not putting a little bit more sugar on your coffee, about not putting a little bit more salt on your food, and you don't realize that you have been eating lots of salt from the sources that you just mentioned. In Mexico, we have a public health program where they take out the salt from the tables on restaurants, thinking that that will improve controlling blood pressure, high blood pressure, but it's not that important when you have all of these people eating processed foods and canned food and all of that. Absolutely right.
Good. The next one I wanted to talk about was to get off the sofa, get off the couch, get some physical activity in your lifestyle. This is just good for general health, but also specifically brain health. And I'll just give you the guidelines that we have right now. And that is that your goal for the week is 150 minutes per week of a moderately intense exercise like a brisk walk. 150 minutes per week, not per day, per week, 150 minutes, or 75 minutes per week of a more brisk exercise like jogging or a treadmill or something like that. 75 minutes. I know we're all busy, but most of us have 75 minutes somewhere to fit in. Now, those are minimums. More is better. And there's research now that says that if you do exercise that kind of goes at a higher intensity for a few minutes and then comes down to your baseline and then goes back up again, that seems to have benefit as well. And what that means is, for example, if you're doing a walk, you would break into a little bit of a jog for maybe 2 or 3 minutes and then come back to your walk again. Doing that for 30 minutes seems to be more effective than just a steady walk for 30 minutes. So if you have the physical ability to do that, that's probably the most effective way of exercising.
Yes, and we've been talking about this on this channel for a long time. The HIIT training, high intensity training, intervals training, that can improve a lot. And moving is important, but knowing how to move can increase the benefits you get from that.
And of course, we also want to mention just quickly resistive exercise. You got to keep your muscles not only toned, but you got to keep them in existence. One of the problems as people get older is something called sarcopenia. They lose muscle mass, and that affects your metabolism and your ability to metabolize sugar and insulin. And you got to maintain muscle as we get older. It also helps prevent falls, and that's one of the initial points that really brings on a cascade of events that leads to death in many people. Is they fall, they break a hip. 1 out of 4 women that breaks a hip is dead within 12 months. 1 out of 3 men that breaks a hip is dead within 12 months. So it's not just a matter of being in a wheelchair. It's a matter of life and death. And one of the ways that you can prevent that is by keeping your muscles strong. You won't be a bodybuilder. You're not going to get huge muscles, but you will maintain function and balance that can literally save your life.
And you're breaking another paradigm that we used to have about exercise. 60s, 70s, 80s, we thought that aerobic training, just running, jogging, and sweating, that was enough to keep our bodies healthy. But then we realized that building muscle is really important. As you have heard on this channel before, the muscle has the capacity to use glucose without the need of too much insulin or none of the insulin that other organs require. So that helps you also to control those high levels of blood sugar over there, keeps your body stronger, and you are really using some of the nutrients that you're getting outside to build that part of muscle. And people who have muscle, as you said, you don't need to be Arnold Schwarzenegger or something like that. You just need to be fit and strong. So when you get to your 60s, 70s, you have less chances of falling, and you can use your metabolism in a more effective way than just having lots of fat instead of muscle, which is the completely other way around.
The next step I'd like to talk about in keeping your brain healthy might be a surprise to a lot of people. I call it eat some bugs. Eat some bugs. And I thought I'd give you a little sample from my upcoming video series, 10 bonus years. If you like this at the end of it and you'd like to get the free video series, you can just email me with your email and we'll show you that email again. But Gilbert, if we can play this about 4-minute video. This is called Eat Some Bugs, and it's the impact on the bacteria that live in your gut and how that affects, if you can believe it or not, your brain health. So let's watch this video.
And next is eat some bugs. But no, not these kind of bugs. Yuck.
All over town, garbage was emptied into containers waiting the once-a-week collection. But most of the containers were without covers, and Well, look.
Did you know that you have 100 trillion microorganisms living in your small intestines right now? 100 trillion bugs. That's even bigger than our national debt. In fact, you have more bacteria, yeast, and other organisms living inside of you than you have cells in your body. You're not so much of a human being as you are a hotel for microbes. But don't worry, this is not a bad thing. You were designed this way. These bugs can do you a lot of good. They help you digest your food, they help maintain the intestinal lining, they protect you against disease, and they can even help you lose weight. The balance between the so-called healthy and unhealthy bugs can make all the difference in your overall health. And now we have some evidence that the bacteria and other organisms in your gut can even affect your brain and mood as well. This is amazing. Some studies have shown that these good bacteria can reduce stress, anxiety, and depression, possibly by altering levels of signaling chemicals in the brain. Don't miss that. Who would ever have guessed that little organisms in your intestines are actually affecting your mood and stress levels? So-called good bacteria can psychologically lift you up, and the bad bacteria can bring you down. We now know there is such a thing called the brain-gut axis that allows direct communication between your digestive system and your brain. The bacteria in your intestines use this system to send signals to your brain that can affect your attitude and how you think. And it works both ways too. We know that psychological stress can actually decrease the number of healthy bacteria in your gut. That's amazing to me. So the natural question is, how do we maximize the good guys and decrease the bad guys? Well, you do not need to take what's called probiotic pills to get more of these healthy organisms. Whether they even make it as far as your gut is still questionable, and if they do, there's still a question of how long any positive changes last. Probiotics in pill form are very popular now, but we are still in just the very beginning stages of our understanding of how to manipulate the home of all these bacteria, what's called your microbiome. In the meantime, one thing that does work is to eat foods that naturally have good bacteria in them, like cultured foods, including yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, tempeh, and pickles made without vinegar. I know, I'm not a fan of most of those either, but I do eat yogurt. When you buy yogurt, make sure it says that it contains live active cultures, not just made with, but contains live active cultures. And the lower the sugar in the yogurt, the better. The other thing for you to do is to send down some food that the healthy bacteria like to eat themselves. We refer to these foods as prebiotics. Probiotics are the bacteria and related organisms themselves. Prebiotics are the food they eat. These prebiotics include things like bananas, wheat bran, cocoa, apples, and oats. There's many more, but you probably already like those, so just emphasize those a little bit more. And remember, a healthier diet also means eating less sugar. The unhealthy bugs love sugar. In general, eat a more plant-based, less animal-based, higher fiber diet that includes whole grains, beans, vegetables, and fruits. The healthy bugs love those, and so should you.
And so I would just point out, of course, those of you that follow this channel know that if you have insulin resistance, you have to watch your carb intake. The video I made is for the general population, but those of you that have insulin resistance have to watch your carbs. You still have some good options. Just be mindful of that as we're trying to feed the good bacteria on what foods you send to them. Jesus, did you have some points here?
No, I mean, nothing to add, especially onto that. I completely agree. The having a healthy gut, it's important because that's where you get most of the nutrients. And sometimes it's not just about taking the food or the supplements, it's how your body is capable of managing all of that. If it doesn't go through the intestinal wall, and you just take it out of your digestive system, it is not going to be effective at all, right?
So your slide here now is talking about the impact of obesity, insulin resistance, and so forth on brain health. I will just mention that a study was done with 2,000 people, and they found those that had a BMI of over 30, that's body mass index, and 30 is considered obesity. Those that had a BMI over 30 had a 3.5 times greater chance of developing Alzheimer's and dementia if they had those in middle age, if they were in that state in middle age, compared to normal weight people in middle age. A 3.5 times greater chance of doing that. Brains of obese people are literally smaller in size than brains of normal weight people. And a study done at Kaiser Permanente looked at 6,500 people. That's a pretty good size study. And they found that those with the largest waist size, their belly, their waist size, had a 3 times greater risk of developing dementia as they got older. So it's not just being overweight, it's also where you carry your weight. And I'm not a big fan of BMI because there's some problems with that, but I am a big fan of the tape measure. And so if you have gut fat, and this is something men usually have more than women, gut fat, belly fat is metabolically very active tissue. It's in and out of the blood system all the time. It raises triglyceride levels. It raises your cancer risk of certain cancers, does all kinds of things. And we want to minimize your waist size if we can. So if you're taking notes, I'll give you the goals for what you want for your tape measure to read. For men, we want it to be below 37 inches. That's 94 centimeters for those of you around the world. Below 37 inches for men, 94 centimeters, below 94 centimeters for men. And for women, below 31 and a half, roughly, below 31 inches for women, and below 80 centimeters is the same thing for women for waist size. And when you do that, when you can keep your waist size below those numbers, you dramatically decrease your risk of all kinds of problems in the future, the least of which is not brain health. That's very important as well. This brings up an important point, though, because most people don't know where to measure their waist size. And it's not at the belly button level. If you press right now, just sitting or standing where you are, on your abdomen, you will find 2 bones sticking out. I'm going to stand up just to show you here, if you can see me. Right about here. It's called the iliac crest at the top of your pelvis. And that is where you officially measure waist size parallel to the floor. And that's where we want to see if you can come in under 37 inches as a man or under 31 inches as a woman. And if you can do that, you have maximized what you can do as far as weight is concerned in maintaining healthy brain health.
Great. And the evidence has been replicated elsewhere. You can see here we have a little image from an article posted on the Aging Research Review article from 2015 in the US, and they used a really clever name for the article. It says, "Does the brain shrink as the waist expands?" And the short answer is yes. Just like you said, when we talk about prefrontal and frontal cortex atrophy, that means the brain gets smaller and the functions get decreased. Prefrontal, we said, is the part of the brain that it's in charge of movement, uncoordinated movement through the brain to the limbs, arms, legs, and all of that. And the frontal cortex is in charge of your behavior. How do you respond to external stimuli? So if you have lots of fat on your belly, that is going to mess up with a lot of process, including your brain.
Very good. We'll just keep on going here to make sure we cover our basics. Number 5 on my list is to stay engaged with life. We don't find too many people that retire at 65 and sit and watch television. Those folks don't last very long. To have a healthy brain, you need to keep using your brain. You need to have a reason to get up in the morning to be able to get up in the morning. The brain and the body is well connected, and you need to find something you're passionate about. Now, this is not, taking blood work and measuring you in a machine. This is talking more psychology now, but still very important for the health of your brain. You need to find something you're passionate about. Hobbies would be a total waste of time if it wasn't for the fact that they're probably good for your brain. You need to keep your brain engaged. And that brings us to the next point, and that is number 6, to stop playing games. This may ruffle some feathers now, but I'm here to tell you basically that crossword puzzles and Sudoku and all of these brain games on the computer, the research is not showing that those do your brain much good at all in decreasing your chances of dementia. The bottom line is computer brain games help you get better at playing computer brain games. You may know the company called Luminosity. Lumos Labs, they have a game called Luminosity. Here in the United States, we hear them advertised all the time. The federal government sued them for $50 million here a couple of years ago for making false claims about the brain health benefits of playing their games. It turns out they could not afford $50 million fine, so the government reduced it to $2 million. And you can still buy their products. So basically, that just doesn't work. What does work is a lifelong way of learning. People with more education do better. Now, if you don't have a higher education, that's all right. You can still maintain your brain health, but you need to get your brain involved with something it's not used to. So that means learning to play a musical instrument when you're 65. It's not too late to start then. It means reading more. My mom is 96 right now, and her mind is still pretty good, and she reads a lot. And I think it's one of the reasons that her mind is still sharp. You got to stay mentally active. It wouldn't hurt to learn a new language. As we said before, there's a whole lot of Spanish speakers out there. And I happen to live in Florida, but I took 4 years of German at school. So maybe what I need to do now is take Spanish. Not only would be practical, it would probably help my brain as well. Jesus, you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I do have a couple of studies about that. So on your screen on the deck, you will see another article. This is from the Clinical Gerontologist magazine, and it is a study where they reviewed 12 brain games, and they wanted to see how they improve cognitive function and if they can prevent dementia. And the result was that they can't. There's no way to measure that objectively, and the results just didn't show any improvement on cognitive function on folks on that. And just going back to the activities that you said, that's also backed up by evidence. There is an article from the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the most important journals of all the world, in 2003. I mean, we have known this since 20 years from now. And they just mentioned exactly what you just said. Reading, dancing, learning an instrument, all of that, those activities can decrease the risk of you getting dementia.
Very good. So we'll continue on. My next one on my list is number 7, and that's eating well and nutrition. Of course, if you've been watching this channel, you know that you want to decrease the amount of food that comes from processed items, and you want to eat closer to the way it grows. If you've not heard me speak before, that is one of my main tenets. Eat food closer to the way it grows. So ask yourself, does a Twinkie grow that way? No. So that's highly processed. No Twinkie trees exist that we've been able to find. So you want to eat food closer to the way it grows. It usually will have a better impact on your blood sugar and your metabolism. We found how interesting that there seems to be a direct relationship between fast food and depression. Isn't that amazing? The more fast food consumed in this study, the greater the chance that the subjects were suffering from depression. It appears that fast foods contribute to inflammation, and inflammation contributes to depression. So, if somebody's having problems in that area, they might want to look twice at their diet and see just how much fast food they're eating, because that seems to be that one category seems to have effect on brain health as well. I want to talk about magnesium very quickly because a lot of people have a question about that. And
Before you go into the magnesium, I just
Go
wanna
ahead.
just so I don't miss the track of this, and we can go to magnesium after this. Two things about what you just mentioned about eating. One of them is the addictive power of sugar, and some studies have shown how the sugar can stimulate the same parts of the brain that cocaine does. So there's a rush of dopamine after you get sugar that can become addictive, and you can just look for sugar and to have that rush of dopamine and feeling well for a moment, with all of the consequences that goes with that. And the other part is the metabolism. I just want to go back for a few minutes to talk about the insulin model and the insulin resistant problem in the brain. Just as we have insulin resistant have the main problem for diabetes, inflammation, and risk of heart attack in the body, and that is the same thing on the brain. In the brain, you have a barrier that it's in charge to don't permit that other things that are not supposed to be on the brain be there. But insulin can go through it because you need insulin to use the glucose on the brain as well. So there is evidence that show that there's also insulin resistance in the brain, and that is one of the major ways or physiopathological ways or ways on the disease of the brain Alzheimer's develops. And that's why it's called type 3 diabetes, because we have been looking for another other causes, and insulin and glucose metabolism in the brain has been there all the time. And that's why some of these mind games probably don't work, because if you don't manage insulin resistance, that problem is still on your brain, and that will lead to Alzheimer's or type 3 diabetes. And you can see there on the image, you have natural products, synthetic compounds, has treatment, some supplements, or maybe some medications that can help with that. But we said this last week, there's no supplement that can outrun a bad diet or a bad lifestyle.
I would also add that I was raised in a home where the meal was not done until you had dessert. That was part of the meal, every meal. And I have eaten sugar most of my life until a couple of years ago. And I found I could not dabble with it a little now and then. I have to just make a clean break. And it's easier for me not to eat sugar at all. It takes a lot less effort for me if I just have a policy that I don't do sugar anymore. You know, a little piece of pie isn't going to hurt. Oh, a couple of bites of ice cream isn't going to be bad. Yes, but those couple bites then give you permission to take a couple more bites. And before you know it, you've got the dopamine running again. And boy, sugar makes you feel good, and it sure tastes good. But I've been able to get off of it, and there's nothing special about what I did. One thing I do recommend, though, is you make it easy on yourself by not having it in the house. It is much harder for you to go to the store at 10 o'clock at night in your pajamas to get some ice cream than it is to walk to your refrigerator and get a couple of bites of ice cream because you've got it in the house. So make it easier on yourself. That's one of the ways I've been able to get sugar out of my life completely. And it's benefited me, and I think it benefits your brain as well.
Absolutely. So we have just a quick slide about magnesium. Is that right?
Yes. So people ask questions about magnesium. I just wanted to point out a couple of different forms. Magnesium glycinate is the most easiest absorbed of all the magnesiums if you're going to take a supplement, and it's least likely to cause any digestive problems. And that's one problem with certain magnesiums. Magnesium citrate is also used as a laxative. But in this case, magnesium glycinate is well absorbed and least likely to cause that. But there are two other forms, magnesium taurate and magnesium threonate that have both been shown to be very well absorbed by the brain. Not all magnesiums are absorbed by the brain, but what we found is those two, taurate and threonate, both seem to have some positive effects on brain health, such as reducing tension, decreasing headache frequency, improving fatigue, depression, and anxiety. So again, no guarantees that you got a magnesium issues and all these problems will go away. But if you are going to supplement with magnesium, and by the way, the research shows that most people are short, at least in the United States, most people are short of magnesium. The majority of Americans don't get enough magnesium. Now, you can help this if you take a multiple vitamin mineral, because there usually will be some magnesium in there. If you choose to supplement with magnesium, then somewhere between 200 and 400 milligrams is probably a good dosage to try. And these three here, the last two, probably have a greater chance of entering your brain and maybe having some positive impact on brain health as well. So just a comment if you are considering magnesium as a supplement, and most people probably are a little short of what they need.
Yeah, and I would just point out on that part that you need the magnesium to go over the layers of the intestine, of the gut. It has to go through there, get to the blood. Then from the bloodstream, it needs to go to the brain. And in the brain, we have also another barrier, a barrier there that can decrease the effects. And just to point out, magnesium is an important part of the metabolism vitamin D as well. So usually, if you can measure your levels of vitamin D and you're supplementing with magnesium, probably it's a good idea to consider to supplement with vitamin D as well, because the effects, they're gonna make something called synergy. They both will increase the positive effects that they can have. But it's like we have always said, you have to know if you need this supplement beforehand.
And it's easy to measure vitamin D. As we've said, and you've seen on this channel, we'd like it to be at least 50, your blood level to be at least 50, maybe even a little higher. The average American is probably around 30 for their blood level of vitamin D. Speaking of vitamin D, I would also say that they did a meta-analysis, a review of many, many studies recently, and they looked at people over age 65 who had blood levels less than 25 for their vitamin D, less than 25, and they were shown to have an increased risk of dementia as they got older compared to people that had higher levels of vitamin D in their blood. Your doctor can measure this. This is a routine test. You just ask for a blood vitamin D level, and we'd like it to be over 50 if we can get it that way. And for many people, they're going to have to take a vitamin D supplement somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 international units to get it up to vitamin D, but to get it up to 50. But you're going to have to experiment with that and see how responsive your body is.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to go to just a little bit about coffee, alcohol?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, just a short comment on that. There's a research over there that you can see. This was developed in China. They found that if you take about around 11 grams of alcohol a day, less than 2 cups or just 2 cups of coffee a day, or green tea, you can reduce your risk of developing dementia or Alzheimer's. This is the review and meta-analysis. If you remember, a meta-analysis is the most efficient way to do research, because you will see what other studies are out there and you will measure the quality of the studies and how do they apply. And that meta-analysis just showed that lower doses of coffee, alcohol, and green tea might help with that. But what are your takes on that, David?
So that's news to me about the alcohol. Jesus, what does that mean in terms, when you said grams or whatever, what is that in terms of drinks? Do you know what that is in terms of ounces of alcohol?
Usually, you don't recommend. It depends on what kind of alcohol are you drinking, and the standard is do not take more than 2 cans of beer for men and 1 can of beer for women, and maybe 1 or 2 cups of white or white wine or just any wine. But it depends on what are you drinking, and this is just going in to say uh, there's a word that Dr. Ford used a few months back that is called hormesis, which is basically depends on how much do you take the benefits that you can have. So alcohol can have multiple negative effects on the body. That I'm just pointing out. Some research says that maybe just taking little alcohol might help. But I mean, probably you have something else there, right?
Well, I would just point out that alcohol killed 88,000 Americans last year. 88,000 Americans, about 10,000 of those were from automobile accidents. That doesn't mention the failed marriages, the bankruptcies, the ruined careers. I'm not a fan of alcohol at any level. I think there's so many other things you can do for brain health. Alcohol, in spite of what this research might have suggested, does not need to be in the formula. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and I will completely agree. And it's like the sugar that we just mentioned, right? If you have the risk of developing some kind of addiction to any of these substances, you might want to avoid them.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered quite a lot, Jesus.
That's right. We just mentioned a lot of stuff, and I think it's moment to go to the Q&A, and we will do our best to solve all of your questions that we have already here on the list. So let's go there. So I just want to make a quick shout out to our new premium member, Fred G. Margo. And I do know that we have a list of premium members on the YouTube channel. So thank you so much for supporting the channel. Dr. Ford has said this before. The team is all over the world. I am in Mexico. I am a physician trained in Mexico. I do not practice on the US. I do practice in Mexico. We have lists there: MTB, start looking for name, Eke Stenquist, Craig Kringlow, Snooky Serna, Monica Squires, Timothy Beatty, Paul G, John Docho, Saxon Hornboy, Ron Mackey, Terry Butchery, Paul Smith, Richard Marinette 12 17 8, RJ Arn AJ1, G Lewis, and Melissa Swan. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Gilbert is on the Philippines. I'm in Mexico, and the economies are quite different from the US, and all of you do to support the channel helps a lot. So thank you, Fred Margo, as well, for being on the channel. Bart Robinson, a very good morning to everyone. Good morning as well over there. Bobby Ocampo, Mabuhay, Magandangang Buhay. I'm sorry if I butchered that. I have heard it a couple of times already. I know love, long life and prosper. So I will say Mabuhay to you as well. E.D. himself, I figure the brain is very important indeed. That's right. And I know we've been focusing a lot on heart health. Do not have a heart attack. Do not die from a heart attack. And a stroke is another big one. And when you have an ischemic stroke, which is a clot that goes into a brain, which is a kind of a heart attack on itself, but on the brain. It doesn't necessarily kill you, but it can incapacitate you and leave you in a wheelchair. And when an area of the brain breaks and all the blood goes out there, that can kill you. So keeping the brain healthy and keeping a good quality of life is important. I will just make a quick comment. You have right there up on the screen, subscribe to our newsletter. That's another way that you can get this information. You can get access to our blog articles and other services that we have and information about the CCM program. TD, Dr. Brewer has passed a ton of information over the time I have followed him. Yes, and it's a big challenge for us to take this content into another languages. So we're starting with Spanish, but just David, I remember last week, David just said, hey, if you want to do German, here I am. So we haven't forgot about that. We might just take your word on it. Dennis Williamson, amen. I hope the content was useful for you and interesting enough for you to keep following us. Share the program. I know Dr. Brewer is not here. He is the protagonist of this channel, but hey, he left here a couple of substitutes, and we try to do our best to give you the best information on this topic specifically. ED himself, he has found to have a lot of plaque, but that are not Alzheimer or dementia. There's an underlying causes, no doubt. I think he's talking about the case that you just mentioned at the beginning of the show, right, David?
Yeah, I think that's what he's referring to. But my point was that because of the fact that this particular individual was very active mentally and was doing a lot of positive things in lifestyle, his body was actually able to create new pathways, neurological pathways, to so-called bypass the limitations of the Alzheimer's disease.
All right. Now, first question of the day, Bobby Ocampo, can nitric oxide help dementia, Alzheimer's? Well, I will say one comment and then I will leave to you, David, if you have something on nitric oxide. From the research that I have read on that, nitric oxide does have a role on how Alzheimer's develop. And we know nitric oxide can increase the can vasodilate, which means making the arteries bigger on the brain, and that can decrease the amount of high pressure developed there and can improve some of the functioning on the brain, making oxygen and glucose more available. But from the evidence that I have seen, I haven't seen a clinical trial that has measured the impact specifically of supplementation with nitric oxide into patients with Alzheimer's or risk of Alzheimer's. But what have you seen about that, David?
I agree with what you just said. I don't see anything else either.
All right. So, research, even though we are in 2022, it's on diapers on many of these topics. There are things that we know theoretically, but in the practice, it needs to be proven first. So I don't think we are in that point with nitric oxide and dementia yet. TBD. Doc, do you know of any relationship between cardiovascular risk and gout or pseudo gout? Yes. Different to the uric acid model, when some people have tried to use uric acid as a marker of inflammation of risk of heart attack. We do know that gout usually correlates with cardiovascular risk, but I will say that it's not specifically because of the gout itself. It's because of all the other metabolism problems that have led you to have gout. So if you have gout, you might have other issues like prediabetes, hypertension, and all of those diseases that are related to what you're eating. So I will say yes, but not because of the gout itself. What do you think about that, David? Looking forward to the nutrition value of red meat and cardiovascular risk.
I didn't hear what you said.
What do you have a comment on red meat and cardiovascular risk?
Oh, well, yes. We now know, of course, over the last 10 years, and a study was just published yesterday, as a matter of fact, just confirming this again, that the saturated fat in red meat is not the culprit. Now, this goes against 40 years of what I've been telling everybody. But it's what I was taught in graduate school and what you were taught, Jesus, in school, if they mentioned it at all, that saturated fat was the enemy. And red meat is known to have, or can have, depending on the cut, the high amount of saturated fat. It is an excellent protein source. It's an excellent nutrition source. Then you get into other issues, of course, about animal rights and vegetarianism and all those other things, which is the topic of another entire show. But the saturated fat is not the problem. Many foods, however, that people eat today, processed foods, have saturated fat in them. That does not give us license to go crazy and eat lots and lots of processed foods because the saturated fat doesn't count anymore. What does count about those processed foods is the high sugar and the high refined carbohydrates that come along with the saturated fat. So just because one problem is not in existence does not mean everything else is okay.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I can tell you, I was on a congress. I mean, I was taught that in med school, and I was on a congress a couple of years back, and they were talking exactly about that. How being vegetarian or vegan is way better than eating red meat, and eating red meat is bad for your cardiovascular health. And just recent evidence have shown that it's not specifically because of that. And we have said that a lot. It's not fat. It's carbs.
Well, and I would say too that you can be very healthy without eating red meat. You don't have to have it. It's certainly where you spend most of your money, at least in the American grocery store, is in that section. And prices are going up in the United States, and I suppose around the world as well. So you can save some money if you can find other protein sources besides red meat. But the saturated fat is not the reason not to eat it.
Absolutely, and just to connect the dots here, I'm talking about red meat because that's what is thought to be one of the main causes of gout. So that's why.
Yeah.
Eating himself. The last I have heard, there's still aluminum involved is associated with Alzheimer's disease. Not long ago, this appears to be a lingering puzzle. Well, I have heard about that yet. I have seen a couple of articles about that, but on my side, what I have seen so far, nothing is conclusive yet. Just that you can have toxicity by aluminum at some moment, but I don't have seen that has a specific role on developing Alzheimer's disease. Bobby Ocampo, any research on the effect of low-dose nitroglycerin being used for heart attack or isosorbide dinitrate? Oh, okay, so let me tell you about this. When you already are developing a heart attack, when you are having all the symptoms, chest operation or chest pain, sweating a lot, having struggles to move, having struggles to breathe, and you're being rushed to the emergency room, that's what we use in that moment. So when you have a heart attack, we can use nitroglycerin, or in Mexico, we do have the second one that you just mentioned, isosorbide. We do use that in Mexico. But there is some contraindication to this kind of medication. So if you're having a heart attack and you are also using Cialis or Viagra, we cannot use any of this because both medications have the effect of making the vessels wider, decrease blood pressure, and you can get a decreased blood pressure that we may not able to recover. So it's really dangerous. If you're having a heart attack, it's important for you to mention that you are taking any of those drugs. If the heart attack is on the right side of the heart, we don't want to use any of these medications because it can have the same effect. So it is a medication that is used when you already have a heart attack, but it's not a medication that you can use to prevent a heart attack. There are some people that already have heart insufficiency, maybe had a heart attack before, and now they have any struggles with that, and this medication can be used on that. But if you are heart healthy in general, or you don't have a heart attack yet, it's not something that you want to use every day.
I would also mention too, Jesus, that if someone in their 40s or 50s is taking an erectile dysfunction medication, many of these men think they have a sexual problem. What they have is a vascular problem. And it should be a flag for them that their body is telling them something is wrong, way beyond sexual relationships. It is, in fact, a survival issue that needs to be addressed beyond just taking an ED medication.
And can be the first sign of pre-diabetes or insulin resistance, even that. So yes, that's a really good point. Just a quick comment on the super chat tab. You can see over there, Gilbert just posted there a picture. You can support the channel in that way as well. $1, $2, $10 go long ways on supporting the channel and making this content available for everyone. Dennis Williamson, need sodium for ATP and the sodium potassium exchange on the cellular level. Yes, we do have sodium on the blood. That's something that we can measure every day. And also having changes on the level of your sodium can also cause problems with the heart, causing some arrhythmias and all of that. But you want to keep that steady, because sodium also is active on the lining of the artery wall and can make it stretch, and that's where hypertension comes by. So you need sodium to function. That's important. It's a critical part of the metabolism, but you don't want to have that too much or in excess.
I don't think the problem with most people is not a low sodium intake. That's not the problem.
No, exactly. It's weird to have to see someone with that, and we see some of that in the on the ER on the hospital. That's called hyponatremia, but it usually relates to problems with volume. When you have too much volume on your body, the amount of sodium in it gets decreased because it gets diluted. And the sodium is also important for the functions on the brain. So you can have problems in the brain because you have too low of sodium. But that's so those are other topics and other diseases that are not specifically related to this.
Jesus, I would mention my email if I can, please.
Absolutely.
For those of you watching, if you like the video that we played a few minutes earlier, that's just a sample. I can send you a series of several videos. They run about 3 or 4 minutes. You get an idea of what my bigger 14-hour program is called 10 Bonus Years, How to Add 10 Healthy Years to Your Life. And I'll be glad to send that to you. Just send me your email to my email. And by the way, give me a month or so because we're still in the studio doing the final editing on the programs. But you can put your email in right there.
All right. Great. We go for Dennis Williamson. Carbohydrates get eaten for an alternate sodium source. I will leave that comment to you, David. What do you think about that?
I don't understand the question. Do you?
I don't think it's a question. I think it's more like a comment. Do you see carbohydrates like a sodium source?
Well, yes. Processed carbs often have sugar and salt added to what is otherwise a very high processed carbohydrate, white flour. Yes, but I'm not sure what Dennis is trying to say here. I'm not sure, but I agree with him. They are another sodium source.
Yeah, but we don't want to have too much of sodium. That's the part. And not all carbohydrates are the same. So if you go to processed food, you will find that.
Yes.
But if you go to safer, healthier sources of carbohydrates, and we do need some carbs on our diet, we just want to avoid to have too much of both. Yeah. What tests measure muscle mass? Well, there are a couple of those. It's hard to measure muscle mass, let me tell you. The most effective way, and even that has its points, is doing an MRI. Magnetic resonance, but you don't have any of those on your home, right? So there are others like measuring BMI, which has its own flaws. A skin fold caliper can measure how much body fat you have and make some calculations to assess how much muscle do you have, what is called lean mass. Hydrostatic waning, air displacement plethysmography, which is all of the machines that you need to do all of those tests, or the DEXA, dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. That all of those ways to measure fat have some implication, can help, but I don't know any way that can measure muscle mass in an effective way.
Yeah, I would say DEXA as well. That's the same machine they use for osteoporosis, right? Bone mass.
Yes.
So it depends, I guess, on how the machine is calibrated on what they're measuring. But I've had that done, a DEXA, and it's a pretty good measure of body fat and also muscle mass. And they're not, I don't think, doing a calculation of one, taking fat mass away and assuming the rest is lean. I don't think they do it that way. I think it's an actual measure of muscle mass, but it's an expensive test and the machines are not readily available at most places.
Great. The CTVT, do either of you have common prescription drugs, I assume, that you strongly oppose because of possible damage to cognitive functions? Well, I do have a couple of those on mine. Usually you want to avoid benzodiazepines. You want to avoid some antidepressants might have been linked to dementia. So all of these control drugs that affect the brain, some antipsychotics and mood stabilizers, all of those drugs that are prescribed on under specific circumstances can have a side effects on the cognitive function of the brain. So I will say any of those. If you're thinking or you need any of those drugs, just go to your physician to assess if you need those, because that can cause some side effects on that regard.
I would also add that even though it's become legal in the United States in many places, I think it's pretty clear that marijuana can have some effects long term on cognitive function. The advocates will deny that. They'll say it's a harmless relaxant. There's plenty of stories out there of people that never went on to harder drugs, but had some very negative effects from just marijuana.
All right. Dennis Williamson, both as a cephalic response and a real sodium demand from all of those trillions of gut organisms. Well, more like a comment again. And I will just say that it's true that sodium plays a key role on at a cellular level in all parts of the body because it's on the membranes of the cell. So that's true. Magnesium bisglycinate is apparently the best bioavailable these days. What do you think about that, David?
Well, maybe we're talking about the same thing here. When I said magnesium glycinate, he's saying magnesium bisglycinate. I don't know if that's just a nomenclature difference or if that's an actual different substance. I know bi means two, but I don't know if. Anyway, from my research, magnesium glycinate is what you asked for.
All right. Eating himself, any idea what the half-life of D3 is? Yes, 24 hours. So that's why you want just to keep your vitamin D3 doses once a day. But it's 24 hours, the half-life of
But
D3.
Jesus, it is fat soluble, and so it actually gets stored in the body. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so you don't have to, for example, take calcium and vitamin D at the same time. Some people think you have to do that for them to work together because your body is storing the vitamin D3. And Jesus, would you agree also that these people that take high dosages of D3 once a week, they're storing some of that, right? They're storing that to be used throughout the week. Have I got that right?
Yes, and it's important just to remind that half-life, you can have that storage and just keep using them along the way, but half-life is the amount of time that the drug requires to be reduced at the half on the bloodstream directly, right? So it takes 24 hours to the body to reduce that initial dose of D3 to the half, and part of that gets storage. Yes.
It's ironic, too, that obese people have a harder time maintaining healthy vitamin D blood levels. And if you think about it, it's because they have so much body fat on their body that the D will get stored in the body fat instead of going to the blood. So one more reason to take some pounds off and some inches off.
Yes, absolutely. Team T1776, great info so far. Will the presentation be made available? If so, where? Well, the presentation, you can just send us an email or give us a call. Let me check with Dr. Ford if we can do that. But the video, it's available on YouTube. So give us a call and probably next week. Let me check on that because this is the first time that I have seen that somebody asked for the slides like that. But you can see the presentation over and over again on YouTube just as we finish the stream. Fort Worth Westside, mix 50 to 20 millimeters of non-flavored milk of magnesia into a 2-liter bottle of seltzer water. It's even better than magnesium bisglycinate. Turns the magnesium oxide into magnesium bicarbonate. What do you think about that, David?
I don't have any opinion about that. I don't know about that. I don't know if would that serve as a laxative too, or maybe the dosage is too low. I don't know. I have no comment on that.
Yeah, I mean neither. I haven't heard about mixing magnesium milk and magnesium with seltzer water before. That's an interesting thought, but I haven't done that bit yet or before. Now, Alamodis, my vitamin D level is at 99%. What is a good level? What do you think about that, David?
Well, I don't know what 99% means.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I will say, where did you get your vitamin D level measured?
Yeah,
for
what you
starters?
want, Naomi, is what you want is to have your physician measure your vitamin D level in your blood, and it should be hopefully 50 nanomoles per liter. That's the measurements, nanomoles per liter. Don't worry about that. Just remember the number 50 or higher. We don't want to go 80 or 90 or 100. We don't want that, but 50, 60, 70 is probably maximum for good health on so many levels of metabolism. And again, I think the average American is probably around 30. And the official guidelines today say that's fine. 30 is fine. They also say that you only need a couple hundred international units of vitamin D a day. That's the official standards. I tell my audiences this all the time. Medicine is a slow boat to move. It moves very, very slowly, just as in cardiovascular disease. The CIMT, most physicians and cardiologists either don't know about it or dismiss it. But it will be the standard 15 years from now. So I hope that that's what you want to know, is that the standards today for vitamin D, both blood levels and recommended dietary levels, are too low, the opinion of a lot of us. And you need to go back and get yours measured. And if you need to get it beyond where it is now, up to somewhere around 50, I would recommend you start maybe around 2,000 international units of vitamin D a day. If that doesn't get it after a couple of months, up to 50, then maybe go to 4,000 or 5,000 international units of vitamin D a day. By the way, it's a fat-soluble vitamin, which means it helps if you take it with a little fat in your food instead of just drinking it with water. So that means swallow your vitamin D pill, but with water, but then maybe have a tablespoon of peanut butter or something like that with it. It will help the absorption.
Great comment on that. Thank you for your comment. It helps us a lot to go through that part, that bunny hole, as Dr. Ford calls them. Daniel Benitez, do you think chess is a good game for the brain? It's interesting because I did read an article that commented about that, and they did a review, and they did not found that chess was something that could prevent specifically dementia of Alzheimer's. Do you have seen any on chess, David?
I think I saw the same study you're talking about. Didn't they suggest it might have a small benefit, Jesus? Didn't they say it's maybe small?
Yeah, but not like something that like to say you should be playing chess every day.
Yeah,
it's not like that. Yeah.
So Daniel, you may play chess every day if you would like. Just don't depend on it to do your brain some good. Stop playing chess so much and learn a musical instrument or learn a new language and go take a walk. That's better advice.
Right. One True Moose. Do either of you have an opinion on taurine in regards to metabolic syndrome? And ins Dr. Menz is here. Brain health. I don't know who Dr. Menz is, but
that's me.
Yeah. I haven't heard something told you like Men's or
maybe I don't know, maybe they are talking about somebody else. I thought maybe they were referring to me. I don't know,
but what do you think about taurine and that?
I don't have anything on that. Do you, Jesus?
I have seen a couple of studies on in vitro where they have seen that it can improve some levels of any of those parts, but not in humans. And I would not recommend it. Taurine is associated with some problems on kidneys, glomerulonephritis, and all of that. So that's not something that I would recommend specifically, and I don't think the research is so far on there, like to make it a supplement of everyday use. My B12 is 941. Is that safe? I would say how is it measured first? But
I will tell you that measuring vitamins in the blood is still a controversial topic. There are companies out there that claim that they can do it and they've got the research to back it up. I've talked to Dr. Brewer about this. He is not convinced that this is legitimate, that there is enough good science behind it. So I cannot comment on a 941. I don't know what the range is for the blood, and I would question whether or not that's actually measuring the actual status. I will tell you this: if you are a vegetarian, you only eat plant products, you need to supplement with vitamin B12. I know that for sure because B12 is only found in animal foods. So for those of you that are vegetarians, most of you probably know that already, that you need to supplement with B12.
all right. Fort Worth West Side, he's talking about the solution that he just mentioned before. Take a gulp of the solution a day, it raises your magnesium levels much faster than a supplement form. Well, I mean, I think in theory you can assume that drinking milk of magnesium can do that, but I will say that I'm not sure that milk of magnesium does have the capacity to go through the gut as a supplement or would do. But I mean, I will look for it and take a look if you see some evidence that can help us into that.
Yeah,
To understand that.
I'd like to see if has any clinical study been published on that. That'd be interesting to know. Or is this
Yeah.
kind of somebody has told you who told somebody else? There's a lot of that out in the field of nutrition, and most of it is not based on fact. I'm not minimizing this. I'm just saying that I've not seen it before. And Jesus, you and we don't know everything, but we do get exposed to a lot of information, and I've not seen this before.
No, I haven't seen that either yet. Mm-mm. All right. Rose, trust Jesus. He holds your life in his hand. Well, I think she's talking about other Jesus. I won't do that.
I will say amen to that. Amen.
Yeah. Well, I will respect that comment and go to the next one. Eddie himself, what solution? Well, I think he's asking about the Fort West Side solution he just mentioned, mixing milk of magnesium with seltzer water. But I mean, that's something we don't have experience on. So, Sandra Dabrowski, what is the best supplement to treat a non-alcohol fatty liver? I will be really cautious about using the word treating. I will say any supplement can help, can assist in improving any disease. Specifically, on my understanding, zinc can help a little bit on that. But I don't know what do you think, David?
My response would be to get to the cause of why you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and it's probably because you're eating too much sugar, or specifically fructose, and the liver is having a hard time handling all that. And I'm assuming maybe the person's already done that already, and that's good if you have, Sandra. But sometimes we overlook the obvious and we look for a pill to fix a problem that's really up to us to fix.
Yeah, and there's no supplement that can outrun a bad diet or a bad lifestyle. So you just did go to the root cause of that. Treat the cause, and then you can think of any supplement. Rose, grass-fed beef. I'm not sure what she's referring there
I
to
think
that.
she wants to know, is that maybe better than commercially made livestock that's fed grains? And so here the difference is in their fatty acid content in the final product of the beef. And we're talking about how much omega-3s versus omega-6s versus omega-9s are in there. And I will have to tell you that even though I keep hearing a lot about the dangers of omega-6s and so forth, and I trust the people at Tufts University. They're one of the experts in nutrition here in the United States, and they pretty well said there's nothing to all of that. It's much to do about nothing. And some people won't eat commercially made salad dressings because they have too much of the wrong kind of fatty acids in them. That's one thing I don't worry about. You've got enough to concern yourself with out there. If you want to do grass-fed beef, nothing wrong with it. Probably a little better, but beef itself, like we said, is a controversial issue. I will say this, the beef industry produces more methane than any other industry in the world. It is far more likely to have an environmental impact on global warming than is carbon dioxide that comes from cars. One thing I like to tell people is we could drive more cars if we would eat less cows. So I'm not a vegetarian. I eat fish, a little chicken now and then. I don't eat beef. And for me, it is mostly an animal rights issue. It is not a nutrition issue. That's stand.
Yeah, I completely get that. And talking about climate change and all of that, too controversial, not the point for us right now. I do have experience on environmental medicine, so I do have my opinions on that side, but I will agree with what you said. E.T. himself, I balance my meat fats with olive oil and omega-3s, and I think he has another comment about that, E.T. himself, and ghee. I don't know. I mean, olive oil, omega-3s, all of that is good. I'm not familiar with ghee.
Yeah,
Can you enlighten me on that?
I know of it too. It's an Indian food, I think. Somebody help me because I don't know what. Sorry, I don't. I know of it, but I can't tell you what it is.
Yeah, Rose, grass-fed butter, and E.T. himself just comments, "This is what real ghee is made from."
So maybe I think we should know this. I can do a simple Google search and figure it out. What was the question about ghee? I don't remember what the question.
No, he just commented that he balances ghee, olive oil, and omega-3s on his diet.
Omega-3s are good for you. There's no question about that. Olive oil seems to be good for you as well. I don't know about the concept of balancing them out. I don't know if that's necessary to balance out your saturated fats with that because, again, the research is pretty clear over the last 10 years that saturated fats are not bad. So I'm not sure you have to balance them.
All right. Rose, how about real salt?
Okay, so real salt is sodium chloride. That's what real salt is. And it doesn't matter if it's Himalayan pink salt or if it's sea salt, it's all sodium chloride. You get salt from two places. You get it from the ground, or they can dry out seawater and harvest it that way. It's sodium chloride. That's all salt is. Salt is salt is salt. And there is no difference from a nutritional standpoint. Now, there's potassium chloride, which is a salt substitute that is available commercially in the grocery store. And that's not a bad idea because people on high blood pressure often have potassium problems that they need to supplement. So if you're using a salt supplement that's potassium chloride, I think they call it Nu-Salt is what they call it, Nu-Salt, NU. And at least we have it in the United States. You use that does a couple things. It decreases your sodium intake and also supplements you with a little potassium. So I like that idea. But again, I think it's missing the point. The point is not the salt shaker. The point is the salt in the food you're eating. So it doesn't hurt to use a salt substitute like potassium chloride, but sodium chloride is sodium chloride is sodium chloride. I don't care what the source is, it's still salt.
Exactly. Well, we have a bunch of comments already. We are almost at the 1 hour and a half. I think we are not going to be able to solve all of those questions. We are really, I'm really grateful. There's so much engagement on this program today. I really appreciate all of your comments, people. And I don't know if you have any additional comment before we wrap this up, David.
I would just start out with, or say what I started out with, and that is that it doesn't do you longevity any good if your brain doesn't come along for the ride. I would be glad to send you my series of videos if Gilbert can put that email up one more time, david@davidminds.com. Just send me your email, and then I will send you that series of videos. You saw a sample of what one of them looked like here in the program today. So it's all about longevity. We all want to live a long time. But of course, we don't want to live in a nursing home with tubes up our nose for the last 5 years and be a burden to our family. So we want quality along with quantity. And part of that quality is brain health. My mom lives in assisted living right now. She's 96. She's good, but she needs help taking medicines and things like that. But she has a lot of people that live there who aren't really there anymore. Oh, they're there physically, but they're not there mentally anymore. And none of us want that. So I think the topic we talked about today of brain health is just as important as heart health and any other topic of health we could talk about.
Yes, I will completely agree on that. And I will just say that we are really grateful. I appreciate everybody who joined us to the live content. Please share with your family, the people you know about this, and join us next week. Next week, Dr. Fuller will be back, and we will keeping touching these specific topics that are really important for preventing heart attack, stroke, and other types of disability. So thanks so much for joining us, and see you next week.